The stars stretched endlessly around the small research vessel Aurora, shining like distant diamonds in the dark. Inside, the crew moved quietly, each absorbed in their own tasks. Captain Alara Tov stood on the bridge staring at the starfield through the thick glass. For weeks they had been exploring uncharted space, mapping new systems and studying planets untouched by any species. It should have been exciting. It should have been a triumph. But now the Aurora was broken, drifting silently toward danger, and every small hope seemed fragile. A sudden jolt shook the ship, making everyone grab the nearest railing. Sparks flew from a damaged console and alarms began screaming. "Impact! Brace for damage!" shouted the communications officer. The crew scrambled, hearts pounding as the vessel trembled violently. The damage was worse than anyone had imagined. Rogue asteroids, traveling faster than any human ship could anticipate, had torn through the hull. Engines were offline, navigation systems were fried, and life support was failing in pockets of the ship. The lights flickered, bathing the bridge in a sickly orange glow. Alara's hands gripped the console so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Status report now," she barked, trying to keep control. The officer shook his head. "Shields are down. Hull integrity falling fast. We're not going to survive without help, Captain." Alara swallowed the rising fear. She was a captain, and captains didn't show weakness. "Then we send the SOS," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Any species, any fleet. Someone has to answer. Someone has to save us." The crew exchanged worried glances. Sending an SOS was simple, but in this sector of space, simple often meant hopeless. No friendly civilizations had been recorded nearby. Most known species here were explorers like them, few and far between. But desperation leaves no choice. Alara activated the communications array, sending the pulse into the void. A simple, clear message: "We are stranded. We are dying. Help us." Days passed. The Aurora drifted silently, its engines dead, its systems barely holding life support. The crew rationed what little food and water remained. The air grew tense with fear. Whispers filled the corridors. Some prayed to gods long forgotten. Others stared at the stars, hoping against logic that someone would come. Then finally a response appeared on the sensors. At first the crew couldn't believe it. Ships this close? They were massive, monstrous, unlike any human vessel they had ever seen. Hulls thick and jagged, bristling with weapons, engines glowing with raw power. "Captain," said Lieutenant Raya, voice shaking, "They're coming, but I don't know who they are." Alara stared, heart hammering. The fleet on the screen moved with frightening precision. These were not diplomats. These were not scientists. These were warriors designed for battle, born to survive worlds where humans could not live a minute. And yet, they were coming. A deep, guttural voice finally spoke through the communication channel. It was harsh, rough, and alien, vibrating through the ship. "SOS received. We are coming. Prepare for extraction." The bridge went silent. The crew froze, unsure whether to be relieved or terrified. The voice did not sound gentle. It did not sound civilized. It sounded dangerous and like a predator addressing prey. Alara's mind raced. These were not the allies they expected, but the fleet's sheer size and firepower meant that even if these beings were killers by nature, they could save them. Maybe the humans had sent their SOS to the wrong species, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they needed. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Hope has arrived. We survive. Or we don't, but we try. And we trust." The crew nodded, some with tears in their eyes, some with trembling hands gripping the consoles. Fear was still there, but beneath it a spark of awe and hope glimmered. The unknown fleet was approaching, and whether they were saviors or monsters, they represented the chance to live. Alara's eyes locked on the main viewport. The ships grew larger, bigger than anything humans had ever built, cutting through space like blades. They were a storm of power and promise. Her chest tightened with emotion, fear, hope, admiration, and a strange thrill that perhaps the universe still had a plan for them. "Prepare the crew," she ordered. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." And in the distance the stars waited, silent witnesses to a desperate SOS, one that had reached the wrong species, and would soon change humanity's fate forever. The dark void of space seemed to tremble as the alien fleet approached. The humans aboard the Aurora pressed themselves against consoles, eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. The ships were enormous, their hulls jagged and scarred from battles long past. Engines glowed like molten metal, and weapons bristled along every surface, ready to strike with terrifying force. Lieutenant Raya swallowed hard. "Captain, they're massive. We can't even compare to them," she whispered. Alaratov nodded slowly, her heart pounding. She had expected rescue. She had hoped for gentle hands, careful guidance, maybe a fleet of explorers who would understand their plight. But this was something different. These were not just soldiers. These were warriors molded by the harshest worlds imaginable. Planets where survival meant brute strength, cunning and unyielding will. The fleet came closer, massive forms reflecting starlight, casting long shadows over the fragile Aurora. Landing craft detached from the larger vessels, streaking down toward the ship. Their speed was terrifying, their precision perfect. In minutes, hulking figures clambered aboard the human vessel. The humans froze at first sight. The Deathworlders were tall, muscular, their skin scarred and patterned from generations of battles on deadly planets. Their armor gleamed, built from metals humans had never seen. Every movement radiated lethal purpose, yet there was calm in their steps. Calm and certainty. One of the Deathworlders, massive even among its kind, stepped forward. Its voice was rough but intelligible enough to understand. "You asked for help. We are here. Follow." Ilara's hand hovered over the console, trembling slightly. "Do they mean to harm us?" she asked. Raya shook her head, though her eyes still betrayed fear. "I don't think, but I don't know." Despite the uncertainty, the humans had no choice but to follow. The Deathworlders moved through the ship like shadows, inspecting every corridor, every control panel. Their scanning devices glowed faintly, recording damage, analyzing structural weaknesses. They did not speak of kindness or reassurance. They simply acted, correcting systems with ruthless efficiency. Hours passed. Slowly, the humans began to notice something strange. The Deathworlders did not harm them. They did not complain about the fragile human technology. They worked in silence, yet each action felt deliberate, almost protective. The Aurora's systems began to hum again. Lights flickered back on, engines glowed faintly, and oxygen levels stabilized. Ilara watched them, awe slowly overtaking fear. "They're fixing it," she murmured. "They're saving us." "Yes," said Raya softly. "But these creatures, they are built to kill, and yet they fight for us?" The thought was almost incomprehensible. Humanity had called out for help, and the universe had answered in a species born for war. Beings who could survive worlds humans couldn't even imagine. Beings who could crush entire fleets without thought. And yet here they were, dedicating their lethal skill to saving fragile humans. One Deathworlder finally spoke to Ilara directly, its eyes cold but not cruel. "You called for survival. We give it. You are fragile, but you have spirit. That is rare. We respect it." Ilara swallowed, fighting the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she said, though her voice sounded small compared to the immense presence before her. Days passed. Humans and Deathworlders worked side by side. The human crew learned quickly to follow the Deathworlders' methods: efficiency, focus, and precision. They repaired systems, reinforced hulls, and recalibrated weapons. The Deathworlders demanded obedience not with cruelty, but with a silent authority that left no room for hesitation. In the evenings, when the crew gathered in the dimly lit mess hall, whispers filled the air. They spoke of the terrifying power they had witnessed. They spoke of awe and fear, and slowly a grudging respect began to take root. Humans realized that hope sometimes came in forms they could not imagine. The universe did not send gentle rescuers. It sent survivors. Captain Alara Tov stood on the bridge one evening watching the Deathworlders at work. Their movements were brutal, precise, and efficient. And yet she felt a strange warmth. The universe had answered humanity's SOS, not with mercy, not with comfort, but with strength. Strength that could save them if humans were willing to endure and learn. She pressed her hand against the viewport, staring at the alien fleet that hung silently beyond the ship. "We asked for help," she whispered. "And somehow, we got the strongest help we could ever imagine." In that moment she realized something profound. Humanity had called the wrong species. And yet, it might just have been the right salvation after all. The calm that had settled over the Aurora was shattered in an instant. A sudden alarm screamed through the ship, red lights flashing violently. Captain Alaratov's heart leapt into her throat. "Report!" she shouted. Sensors blared with warnings. Dozens of incoming vessels had appeared from the darkness, moving fast, coordinated, and deadly. They were not explorers. They were marauders, a fleet of alien raiders who had been tracking the Aurora across the void, waiting for a moment of weakness. Their hulls glowed with deadly energy, weapons charged and ready to destroy everything in sight. The human crew panicked. Engineers dropped tools, technicians scrambled to consoles, and even the seasoned Lieutenant Raya's hand shook as she activated defensive protocols. "Captain, they're here! They'll destroy us in minutes." Ilara's gaze shifted to the Deathworlders, who were already moving with terrifying precision. They didn't hesitate. They didn't panic. Massive ships detached from the fleet, engines blazing, charging toward the enemy with a speed no human vessel could hope to match. Weapons fired in synchronized bursts, cutting through the first wave of marauders like lightning through clouds. Humans watched, mouths agape, as the Deathworlders struck with brutal efficiency. Their ships dove into the oncoming enemy, unleashing firepower and missiles, ramming smaller ships when necessary. The battle was a storm of light and fire, explosions tearing through the void, casting eerie glows over the terrified humans on the Aurora. Captain Alara clenched her fists. "We can't fight like that," she shouted, though even she felt a strange surge of hope. "We don't have the firepower. They'll annihilate us." But the Deathworlders ignored her. They fought as if it was instinct, as if war ran in their veins. They shielded the Aurora, intercepting missiles, destroying enemy ships before they could even aim. And in their precision, humans began to understand something terrifying yet awe-inspiring. These beings were the ultimate survivors. Lieutenant Raya swallowed hard. "Captain, they're saving us." "Yes," Alara whispered. Her voice was almost lost in the roar of engines and explosions. "But they could destroy all of these marauders with one move if they wanted to, and yet they're protecting us." The crew realized the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity had sent a desperate SOS, fearing death and isolation. The universe responded not with gentle hands but with predators, Deathworlders, who could have killed every threat without effort. Yet here they were, risking themselves to keep humans alive. Hours passed. Explosions shook the Aurora, alarms blared, and yet slowly the tide turned. The marauders were pushed back, disoriented and terrified by the precision and brutality of the Deathworlders' assault. Humans for the first time felt a surge of courage. Engineers manned auxiliary weapon systems, firing under Deathworlder guidance. Even unarmed crew members found ways to assist, directing damage control or signaling targets. Amid the chaos, Ilara caught sight of one Deathworlder ship intercepting a massive energy cannon from an enemy vessel. The ship rammed it with bone-crushing force, exploding in a blinding flash. The alien commander on the bridge looked toward her, eyes like steel. And in that instant she felt it, respect. These beings understood survival in ways humans could barely imagine. They fought not out of hatred but because surviving, protecting, and enduring was their essence. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered to herself, This is what it means to survive, to endure, no matter the odds." As the last of the marauders fled, broken and scattered, silence fell over the void. The Aurora shook, systems sparking, and humans fell to their knees, exhausted but alive. The Deathworlders stood tall among the wreckage of enemy ships, scars glowing under their armor, breathing heavily but unbowed. Elara realized something profound. Humanity had always believed strength came from technology, from intelligence, from strategy. But now she understood another truth. Strength came from will, from courage, from the refusal to surrender even in the face of impossible odds. The crew gathered on the bridge, watching the Deathworlders tend to their wounded ships, repairing damage with almost casual efficiency. No words were needed. Humanity had witnessed power, precision, and sacrifice. And deep down, they knew the SOS had reached the wrong species, and yet it had reached the right salvation. Elara pressed a hand to the viewport, staring into the void where the enemy had fled. Her voice trembled but carried determination. "We survived today, because they answered our call. They fight. Not because they owe us, but because they respect survival, and we will never forget this." The Aurora floated in silence, surrounded by alien ships that seemed as much a promise as a warning. Humanity had been reminded that the universe was dangerous, but also that help could arrive from the unlikeliest of sources. Predators who understood the cost of life, death, and the will to endure. And in that moment, for the first time since the disaster began, hope burned brighter than fear. The battle had ended, leaving the Aurora battered but alive. Silence settled over the ship, broken only by the soft hum of repaired engines and the occasional hiss of cooling machinery. Humans walked through the corridors cautiously, eyes wide as they observed the Deathworlders moving with purpose among them. There was no celebration, no cheers. Only the quiet, deliberate work of survivors. Captain Elara Tov followed one of the Deathworlders into the main engineering bay. Sparks flew as alien hands worked, repairing hull breaches and stabilizing life support. The Deathworlder glanced at her, eyes sharp and piercing, yet not unkind. "Your species, fragile, but stubborn, admirable," it said in its guttural voice. Elara swallowed, feeling the weight of its words. Fragile. Yes, stubborn. Also yes, but that stubbornness has kept us alive, she said quietly, almost to herself. The Deathworlder made no reply, only nodded and returned to work. Over the next days, humans and Deathworlders worked side by side. At first, the humans struggled to keep up. Every action, every procedure was precise and unforgiving. The Deathworlders demanded efficiency, leaving no room for hesitation. But slowly the humans began to learn. They discovered that survival required more than knowledge or technology. It demanded focus, endurance, and courage beyond fear. Young engineer Tali was the first to understand the lesson. She had been terrified during the battle, frozen as the enemy fired upon them. But a Deathworlder had grabbed her arm, pulled her to a console, and guided her hands. "Do or die," it had said simply. No lecture, no warning, only action. Her hands shook at first, but as she completed the task, she felt something she had never known. Power. A small spark of confidence that she could survive. Humans began to imitate the Deathworlder's efficiency. They reinforced hulls, repaired engines, and learned to operate weapon systems under the aliens' watchful eyes. It was brutal work, exhausting both body and mind, but with every repair, with every calculated action, the humans felt a strange bond forming. They were not just learning from the Deathworlder, they were being tested, shaped, and strengthened by them. In the evenings, when the work slowed, humans gathered in small groups to talk in whispers. They spoke of awe and fear, of the alien creatures who had saved their lives and yet seemed terrifying in every way. "They are killers," one young crew member said. "And yet, they fought for us." Elara listened from the bridge, her hand on the viewport as she watched the Deathworlders move through the corridors. She realized the truth. Survival was not about comfort or safety or clever plans. Survival was about enduring, learning, and sometimes trusting strength far greater than your own. Humanity had called for help and received warriors, predators who respected life because they had faced death countless times. One evening, a Deathworlder approached Ilara quietly, standing tall but relaxed. Its eyes, though fierce, held a glimmer of understanding. Your people will survive. You are weak, but you endure. That is rare. Ilara swallowed, feeling emotion rise in her throat. We will survive because we have no choice. And because of you, you taught us that survival isn't just luck. It's strength, focus, and courage. The Deathworlder made a sound that could have been a chuckle. Perhaps, or perhaps, you have always had it. We only reminded you. That night, as the humans slept, the Aurora floated through space, surrounded by the quiet presence of the alien fleet. Ilara could not sleep. She walked the corridors, observing humans and Deathworlders alike. She saw engineers sharing techniques, medics assisting in repairs, and young crew members learning to handle weapon systems with a precision that had been impossible before. Hope, fragile but real, began to grow among the humans. They realized that their SOS had reached the wrong species, a species meant for war, for death worlds, for survival beyond imagination. And yet this wrong species had given them the chance to live, to learn, and to grow stronger than they had ever believed possible. Ilara paused at the viewport, staring out at the alien ships resting silently around the Aurora. We may be fragile, she whispered, but we endure. And now we are not alone. The universe sent us predators, and they became our salvation. For the first time since the disaster, she allowed herself to hope fully. Humanity had survived the first storm. The lessons from the Deathworlders were harsh, unyielding, and demanding. But in those lessons, humans had begun to see themselves differently. Not weak, not helpless, but alive, learning, and ready to face whatever the universe would throw at them next. And in the quiet of space, amid alien strength and human courage, a bond was formed. Fragile, yet unbreakable, forged in fire and fear, promising that survival was possible even in the most impossible odds. The quiet after the first battle did not last long. Weeks passed since the marauders had fled, but the humans aboard the Aurora could feel tension building in the cold, empty space around them. Sensors suddenly flared again, and the ship trembled under another wave of incoming enemy vessels. This time the fleet was larger, faster, and more organized. Captain Ilara Tov gripped the console, her heart hammering. They've returned. This time, they mean to finish us, she said, her voice tight with urgency. The humans stared at the screen, fear twisting their faces. They had survived once, barely, and now they were staring at annihilation. But the Deathworlders were ready. Their ships moved with terrifying coordination, surrounding the Aurora in protective arcs. Engines roared, weapons powered up, and every alien crew member took their position with unshakable focus. Where humans saw monsters, the Deathworlders saw strategy, efficiency, and the inevitability of survival. Lieutenant Raya looked at Ilara, eyes wide. We can't fight them, not like this. Ilara shook her head, drawing strength from the calm determination of their alien allies. We fight because we must. Not because we are strong yet, but because we survive, and we survive together. The battle began with a sudden roar of energy. Marauder ships fired massive blasts, aiming to tear the Aurora apart. Explosions erupted in space, shaking the hull, and alarms screamed. But the Deathworlders struck back immediately, their weapons precise and devastating. Entire enemy ships disintegrated in moments, while others were rammed or disabled by the alien fleet's brutal tactics. Humans, inspired and guided by the Deathworlders, joined in. Engineers manned weapon stations, firing under alien instruction. Medics and crew members helped coordinate shields and damage control. Every human was part of the fight now, no longer helpless passengers but active participants in their survival. Young Tali, the engineer who had once frozen in fear, now directed a turret with calm focus. A Deathworlder beside her gave only one instruction: aim, fire, do not hesitate. And Tali did. Enemy vessels exploded, and for the first time she felt the raw thrill of fighting not to conquer but to survive, to protect her friends and herself. The battle raged for hours. Lasers and missiles streaked through the void, ships twisted and spun, and the Aurora shuddered under repeated strikes. Yet slowly the tide turned. The Marauders, overwhelmed by the combined force of humans and Deathworlders, began to falter. They underestimated the determination of humans, stubborn, fragile, and yet willing to endure against impossible odds, strengthened by the fiercest warriors the universe had ever produced. Captain Alara watched the chaos from the bridge, awe and pride swelling in her chest. She realized something vital. Humanity was not helpless. They had been terrified, untrained, and fragile, yes, but they had learned. They had adapted, and under the guidance of the Deathworlders, they could endure even the deadliest of storms. One massive Marauder ship managed to get close to the Aurora, its energy cannons charging to fire a final devastating blast. The Deathworlders moved instantly. A hulking alien commander leapt aboard the smaller ship, using its brute strength to disable the weapon in seconds. Explosions rocked the enemy vessel, and it broke apart in a brilliant fireball, sending a shockwave through the battle. Humans on the Aurora cheered in relief, though it was tempered with exhaustion and fear. They had survived again. They had faced death and learned that survival was not just about fleeing danger, but standing firm, learning, adapting, and fighting with every ounce of will. Alara wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the courage she saw in her crew. They were no longer merely scientists, engineers, and passengers. They were survivors. They were fighters. And alongside the Deathworlders, they had proven that life, no matter how fragile, could endure against unimaginable odds. As the remaining Marauders fled into the dark void, Alara pressed a hand to the viewport. The Deathworlder ships glimmered around the Aurora, silent but imposing. They had saved humanity not once but twice. They had fought with ruthless precision, yet they had taught humans something more valuable than firepower: the courage to survive, the will to endure, and the strength found in unity. The stars were calm again. But this time, the humans aboard the Aurora felt different. They had seen the face of death, survived its fury, and found allies stronger than any human mind could imagine. And in that moment, Alara knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity would not remain fragile. They had tasted survival on the edge of annihilation, and they would never forget the species that had shown them how to endure. The battle had left scars, both on the Aurora and on the human crew. Fires smoldered in the corners of corridors, hull panels were cracked, and life support flickered in uneven pulses. Humans moved cautiously, weary from the long fight, yet aware that the enemy might return at any moment. The Deathworlders, as always, were relentless. They patrolled, repaired, and prepared for the next wave without complaint. Captain Alara Tov walked through the corridors, her boots echoing on the metal floors. Every glance at her crew reminded her of how fragile humans truly were, and how much they had endured. Young engineers, medics, and officers moved with new strength, guided by the aliens' precise methods. But she could see the exhaustion etched into their faces. Fear lingered like a shadow, refusing to leave entirely. Then the sensors flared again. A massive enemy vessel had returned, larger and deadlier than any before. Its energy signatures lit up the void, signaling annihilation for anything in its path. The Aurora shuddered as the alien ship aimed directly at it, ready to fire. The Deathworlder commander approached Alara, massive and imposing. Its voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We hold them. You escape." Alara's heart skipped a beat. No, she said firmly. We leave together. Humanity does not abandon its allies. The Deathworlder studied her, eyes narrowing. Then with a sound that might have been a growl of approval, it nodded. Orders were given. Humans and Deathworlders moved in coordinated chaos. The crew activated every system, reinforced shields and manned weapon stations. Every human became a weapon, every Deathworlder a wall of indestructible strength. The enemy fired. Massive beams of energy tore through space, striking the Aurora and the Deathworlder ships surrounding it. Explosions shook the vessel, throwing humans to the floor. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and smoke filled the corridors. Yet in the chaos, humans and Deathworlders fought side by side. Tali, the young engineer who had once frozen in fear, now ran along the corridor, repairing damage as it happened. She worked alongside a Deathworlder, her hands guided by their enormous strength. "Keep moving," the alien barked. And she did, adrenaline fueling her determination. Some Deathworlders had made the ultimate sacrifice. They charged the enemy ship directly, their massive forms colliding with the alien vessel, tearing through its defenses. Explosions engulfed them, yet their actions gave humans precious seconds to redirect weapons and reinforce shields. Ilara felt a surge of grief and awe. These beings, who could have ignored humans entirely, chose to fight for them, to protect them, even at the cost of their own lives. Humanity's fragile hearts felt a strange warmth. They were not alone. They never had been. The universe had sent them teachers in survival, warriors who understood life and death better than anyone. Hours passed in a blur of chaos and fire. Slowly the tide turned. Humans learned to anticipate, to act with speed and precision. Deathworlders fought with brutal efficiency, covering gaps and teaching without words. Finally, the enemy ship shuddered under combined fire, massive cracks appearing along its hull. With one final coordinated strike, it exploded, sending debris scattering across the void. Silence fell. The Aurora floated among the wreckage, battered but intact. Humans sank to the floor, exhausted, hands trembling. Some wept quietly. Others stared at the stars through the viewport, unable to process the survival they had just achieved. Ilara walked among her crew, touching shoulders, offering quiet reassurances. "We survived," she whispered. "Not because of luck, but because of courage, focus, and unity. We fought together, humans and Deathworlders, and together we endured." She paused at the viewport, staring at the silent Deathworlder ships surrounding them. Some were heavily damaged. Some were smoking. Some had made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure survival. Yet all had demonstrated a principle humans had long forgotten. Survival is not given. It is earned. It is fought for. And sometimes it requires the strength to act when death is certain. Raya approached Ilara quietly, voice soft. They didn't have to help us. They could have left. And yet they stayed. They taught us more than we could ever learn alone. Ilara nodded, emotion rising in her chest. "They are predators," she said. "Stronger than anything we know. Yet they chose to fight for life. Not because we were strong, but because we were worthy of survival. And that is a lesson we will carry forever." As the humans moved through the damaged ship, repairing and helping each other, a quiet understanding settled over the crew. They had survived the worst the universe could throw at them, and they had done so not by cleverness alone, but by trust, courage, and unity with beings stronger than any human mind could imagine. The Aurora floated in the endless void, battered, scorched, and trembling. But within it, the human crew's hearts were stronger than ever. They had faced annihilation and survived. They had seen the price of sacrifice, and they had learned that, even in the darkest corners of the universe, life, fragile, human life, could endure against all odds. And in the silence of space, with Deathworlder ships guarding them like sentinels, humanity understood something profound. Survival was not just about avoiding death. It was about courage, loyalty, and the willingness to fight for life, no matter the cost. The debris of battle floated silently in the void, remnants of marauder ships and shattered pieces of the enemy fleet. The Aurora drifted among them, battered but alive, its hull scarred, its lights flickering gently. The human crew moved slowly through the corridors, exhausted, some leaning on walls for support, others helping their companions. They were alive, and for the first time in days they felt the weight of survival. Captain Ilara Tov stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. The Deathworlder ships hovered around them, silent sentinels, their massive forms reflecting starlight. Some bore heavy scars from the battle, some were missing pieces of armor. But they had survived. They had protected the humans. And in doing so, they had shown the crew something they could never forget: the true meaning of strength. Lieutenant Raya approached quietly, standing beside Ilara. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" she asked softly. Ilara shook her head, though a faint smile touched her lips. "Maybe not, but we'll carry their lessons. Humanity is fragile, yes, but we endure. We survive, and if the universe sends the wrong species, we just might find the right salvation anyway." The crew gathered in the main observation deck, looking at the Deathworlder fleet with awe and gratitude. They had been saved by creatures that humans would have called monsters, predators bred for war, for death worlds, for survival beyond imagination. And yet these beings had fought for them, taught them, and inspired them. Tali, the young engineer, ran her hands over a console, still trembling from the last battle. I never thought I could do this," she whispered. "I never thought I could survive. But now I see we can endure." The Deathworlders did not speak to her directly. They did not offer comfort or praise. They simply stood, strong and silent, and in that presence humanity felt a strange kind of respect, not of fear but of recognition. These beings had faced death more times than humans could count, and yet they had chosen to fight for life. Ilara walked among her crew, placing hands on shoulders, exchanging quiet words of encouragement. She felt the truth of what they had all learned. Survival was not given. It was earned. It was fought for, and sometimes it required alliances with those whose strength was beyond imagination. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly. The universe was vast and dangerous, full of threats humans could barely comprehend. But humanity had seen what could be achieved with courage, determination, and allies who understood the value of life. They had survived against impossible odds. They had learned to endure. One Deathworlder commander approached Ilara finally, towering over her, its eyes sharp but not unkind. "Your species has spirit. Weak, yes. Fragile, yes. But spirit, that is rare." Ilara met its gaze, her own eyes shining with emotion. "We will remember," she said quietly. "We will survive, and we will honor what you have taught us." The Deathworlder nodded once, then turned, moving toward its ships. Slowly, the fleet lifted off, engines glowing, disappearing into the endless darkness of space. The humans watched in silence, understanding that these warriors would not be seen again, at least, not for a long time. But the Aurora felt different now. The ship had been a symbol of fragility, drifting helplessly through the void. Now it was a symbol of endurance, of unity, and of humanity's will to survive against any challenge. Ilara pressed her hand to the viewport, watching the stars stretch infinitely. "We have survived," she whispered, "not just because of strength or technology, but because we never gave up. We endured, we fought, and we learned that even in the darkest corners of the universe, hope can arrive in the most unexpected forms." Raya leaned beside her. "And we'll never forget them." "No," Ilara said firmly, "and we'll never forget what we learned. Humanity is fragile, but we are survivors. We endure, we adapt, and we grow stronger every day." The Aurora turned its engines toward the nearest inhabited star system, slowly leaving the battlefield behind. Humanity had faced annihilation and emerged stronger, They had learned that strength came not just from weapons or technology, but from courage, unity, and the willingness to fight and survive no matter the odds. As the stars stretched endlessly ahead, the crew knew that the universe would always be dangerous. Marauders, storms, and deadly worlds awaited them. But humanity was no longer the fragile species that had sent a desperate SOS. They were survivors, forged in the fire of battle, guided by the fiercest warriors the cosmos had ever seen. And in that moment, the human crew of the Aurora understood something eternal. The universe might be dark, cruel, and merciless, but as long as humanity endured, adapted, and fought together, they could face anything, even death worlds, even monsters, even the unknown. A new dawn had arrived, not in the stars, but in their hearts. Humanity had survived. Humanity had endured. Humanity was ready.